Hello and welcome to the Christian Fantasy and Sci-Fi Podcast, where we talk about anything and everything fantasy and science fiction. Your host is Matt Crosswhite, and the subject matter expert is Josiah Marshall. And here we go.
Well, hello, welcome back. Thank you for joining us again for this episode of Christian Fantasy and Sci-Fi Podcast. Our host is me for this time being, but Matt will be with us again next episode. But I would very much like to, and I'm very honored actually, to introduce to you our guest today. He is not only a phenomenal musician, but he happens to be my brother. And I couldn't think of any other instance out there where a podcast invited on the very musician that provided the music for their show. And so I really want to give a big shout out and just a good push for my brother, Andrew Marshall. Thank you, Andrew, for being here today. I'm so glad to see you and have you on. This is going to be a blast.
Yeah, of course. Anytime I can talk about myself and nerdy stuff, I'm all about it. Myself and nerdy stuff all at the same time. What could be better?
Sure. Yeah.
If only the people at home could see me. Oh my goodness. Then they would know how beautiful I am. And
well, yeah, we did grow up in the same household. And so it's interesting how even as we were connecting before the episode of talking about Star Trek, Doctor Who, and we're going to have a fun conversation about science fiction together with Andrew. It's I really appreciate his insight on a lot of this because it's not just a TV show, Star Trek or Doctor Who or Star Wars, even for that matter.
Yeah.
But first, Andrew, you've been into music for a long time, right? We grew up in a household that was filled with music, and,
right.
How much of that do you think played into your desire to go into music?
The fact that we all played music, I think that just created a bedrock of this is normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like when I don't know that it made me think, hey, maybe I could do this. We all do this. Maybe I could do it. It just made it normal. And so when I had the inspiration to do it, I didn't think about whether it was doable or not,
Mm-hmm.
which is good because when you're
Yes.
pursuing something lofty or fleeting, it's good to have some ignorance involved. Some ignorant arrogance is why I think the species perpetuates itself, because if we knew what it was actually like having kids, we wouldn't do it. But we think, nah, my kid will be different. My kid won't be like that. Like, nah, they will. But you need that ignorance and that arrogance to do anything, especially do something in the arts, like pursue a music career. Like, no, I can do it. Look at me. I'm beautiful and I can sing. What else do you need in life?
Well, and frankly, you've done it. I mean, I can't really count how many times I got to sit in a coffee shop or someone's backyard and listen to you really produce some amazing music. I just happened. So I remember very early on of being able to bring a camera and record a lot of your sessions and getting that up. And I just happened to be on an old on YouTube and looking through some of the old videos that I had posted over the years. And one of them, or a few of them, were actually sets from when you performed at a coffee shop in Salt Lake City. And one of the videos, you put "Little Boy Blue" by was that Eugene Fields?
Yeah.
You put that to music.
Yeah.
And it has been viewed over 5,000 times.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
Yeah, which surprised me about that is at some point you took it down, maybe by my request. I don't know, because I was working on a recording or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But then you had, correct me if I'm wrong, you had a professor reach out to you.
Yes.
Because they had been using the song as an example.
Correct.
Towards something.
Correct.
Oh, well then, yeah, put it back up.
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
People are using it. Cool.
And from what I know, majority of that traffic has been from his classroom.
Yeah, that's cool because that's such a niche. That's such a niche thing, right? Of like, take poetry and put music to it, and but like, and not even just like, it's a little bit more obscure, older poetry that the young kids especially are only going to learn about in a classroom or
Right.
from a passionate person in their life, maybe, but like they're really gonna learn about it in the classroom. And so it was already a niche project for me to want to do anyways, was this poetry that we grew up with. It's like, I bet I could put this to music, which I did also to If by Rudyard Kipling.
Yes, I was going to mention that. Yes. Oh,
and
yeah.
so it was those projects were a little bit just indulgent for me because it was fun. Really, these poems that I loved, that I still love.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then your rendition of Gold Digger, which
that was on there too.
Family favorite.
Yeah. Gold Digger by Kanye West, and well, it was a play on the old Ray Charles song, but it was that was a weird little hit in some of my circles. People
it was
really got into that, and it's fun.
And then one other, I think it's a fun plug, is that so when I got married, I told you, okay, this is your opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
You can write a song and put in it what you want. And you played it. So our sister sang with you, and our cousin joined you with percussion.
Yeah, if we could not mention their names, I'd rather keep the attention on me and just like not stray away to people who aren't here.
But you really wrote the song, and the DJ artist came up to me. Actually told me later. He didn't tell me there. When we went back to him and settled things up and everything, he said, I have been in so many wedding ceremonies and so many after parties. Yeah. I've heard so many family members give their songs and sing and all this jazz. Yeah. He said that was the best I'd ever heard.
Oh, wow.
Which makes sense, because after you did that, and he said, wow, let's give an applause for Andrew. And then he says, you know what? Wow, that was really phenomenal. Let's give another applause for Andrew. That was great. He loved it. He thought it was phenomenal. No, I won't repeat some of the lyrics, but but really your chorus about what marriage can be and what it should be and what it can look like was really quite poignant, because it was obvious you put a lot of thought into it. Yeah. And one of the things I've liked about your music is that there is so much there's a strong relational message that's involved, because you even wrote a song about your wife, and you wrote a song about her mother, about having 5 monkeys in a tree. And so, and even some of your other stuff. One of my favorite off of your first album, you said you wrote in, 30 minutes. And so,
which song is that?
Oh, good grief. I was naming off.
Well, if there's off the first album, it was probably When I Give You Control.
Yes, When I Give You Control. Yep.
Yeah, When I Give You Control is definitely that band Westward. It was pretty much our favorite song for all of us. And it was like, I needed one more song. We were going in the next day to record, and it's like, we just don't have enough. We had a couple days to work on it before we recorded, but I want to try and get one more song to really utilize our time in the studio. That was the whole point of it. Whether it would make it on the record or not, who knows? But we just want to be able to have some fodder for the studio. And you know what was, if I don't mean to cut you off, but I'll follow my stream of consciousness here with the realities of that song.
Go ahead.
And the reality of writing that song. But so I wrote it super fast, and it's one of our favorite songs from those 2 records we put out. And I think I know why now.
Okay.
And it's because it's a good song. Like you're just gonna like songs that are good. But it was the fact that I wrote it so quickly. The reason I wrote it so quickly was because I didn't have time to write it how I would normally write it. Right. And how I would normally write it is, I'm going to write one sentence or one line, and then I'm going to be paranoid and question it for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Right. Which is that's writer's block. Writer's block is no longer having confidence. I had a great professor tell me this about an English professor. Writer's block is when you no longer believe that what you are saying is worth hearing. Or you're questioning whether what you're writing or what you're saying is worth hearing. That's writer's block. It's not that you can't think of anything. It's that you're thinking too much.
Right.
It's you just write. You just write it down. And so with that song, I totally got out of my way. And I was unconscious to this because I just did it out of necessity. It felt like a necessity, right? Like I just need one more song. But in reality, what I was doing was I was getting out of my way. And I think that applies to all creative pursuits, right? Like whether it's writing or music or painting your house or like whatever, like when you get out of your way, that's when some clarity comes in because the fog rolls in with all the questions you're asking yourself. With the fog comes in with the insecurities of like, can I do this? Will it be good enough? All these things, like that's not what it's about. It's like, how can you get out of your way? And once I realized that, it started this trend for me of which actually applies to the song Take Time that you guys are using for the intro for the podcast.
Yes.
Because what that did was made me real like, okay, what are some methods and tactics that I can come up with for me to help me get out of my own way? And so I still do this in life every once in a while. I'll take a month and I write a song every single day. Sometimes with parameters on it, sometimes with a time limit, sometimes with a structure already mapped out. And then I'll reach out to somebody or I'll have topics ready to go for each day. Or a lot of times I'll just text my wife, Natalie, and be like, say something. Or give me something. Because what I realized was like, oh, but that's not like inspired, right? Like, no, this is a muscle that we work out. And the only times we get writer's block that we can't access the muscle is when we're overthinking it. Right? So it's like, so I don't need to try and think of some profound topic. And I'm speaking a lot for myself, but I think a lot of this is applicable to people in their in artistic pursuits in general. But when Natalie would just give me a prompt and I would just start writing, all of a sudden those muscles started flexing. Right? And it's like, oh, all these things start connecting. And so I wrote Take Time in 2 hours. Because I wasn't thinking about it. Right. It's like that was the task for today. Somebody like the time was the prompt for that day. And so like, okay. So then I just stopped thinking about it. I stopped overthinking it, right? And I just started writing. I just started playing, which I think accesses a lot of the joy also in the process. When you stop questioning yourself, you stop pushing pressure on yourself of like this has to be a certain thing or this has to sound a certain way. And all of a sudden I'll start with a topic that means nothing. Like, oh, I'm starting with this idea of just whatever it is. Another song I wrote and released was called Supernova. And it's like, oh, I'll write a song. And it's kind of just whatever imagery would come to my head or what would kind of first pop in. And it just feels like a nothing song. And then all of a sudden by the end, I've connected with it. And all of a sudden by the end, oh, there's a human aspect to this. I've realized I've related to this topic through this journey. And all of a sudden I have a song with a meaning. And I didn't have to put any pressure on it. The meaning just showed up. The meaning just showed up because I allowed my passion to thrive, right? Like it's already there. I don't have to force it out. I don't have to polish it out. I mean, that is what I'd write a song in 2 hours and then I'd work it a little bit. Mostly my producer helps me work it to make it what it is, you know, it helps it polish it out a lot. But
right. Because you're not creating in a vacuum.
Right.
To produce what we both would argue to be excellent art, it would call for the investment of others in you being, because even the whole process, I've had this discussion recently with people, is that the process and the goal of art is it's personal, but then when you're finally able to get to the stage that you want to share it with other people, then it becomes something more, and it becomes something that ends up belonging to other people, so much in the sense that they produced it, but that they get to identify with it, that they get to come alongside the artist who is already standing there and say, let's say a gallery, and being very vulnerable and going, okay, what do you think? And then to have those type of connections where, oh, this one over here, I really see myself in this. And this is what I see in there. And offering sometimes a perspective that you don't see.
Right. Yeah. it's like I've kind of gotten to a point where I don't really quickly offer up what a song is about. It's like if we want to get into it, and it's like, oh, I'll happily tell you what inspired the song and what I was thinking about when I wrote each line. But really what I'm more interested in is what you hear, because it's just as valid, right? Like if you connect with it and you get something out of it, it doesn't always matter what the author intended. You got something out of it. This is a strange example, but Andy Warhol, with like whatever, plenty of opinions about Andy Warhol, but one of his most famous pieces is his silk screening of a Campbell's chicken noodle soup can.
Right.
Yes. Which the dude was an oddball, living in an era where oddballs were allowed to really thrive, and so he was just doing weird stuff. But then you listen to interviews with the guy, and he may have just been a secret genius. I don't know, because I always just kind of wrote him off as like, he's just odd who got too big of an audience. But then I start diving into him, and you see these interviews with the gallery showing that when he presented the Campbell's chicken noodle soup, amongst other things.
Yeah.
And a guy interviewing him said, it's just a can of soup. It's like, there's nothing interesting. Like you just recreated the can of soup. It seems kind of easy, doesn't it? Why would you do that? And Andy Warhol's response, paraphrased, is something to the effect of, because it was easy. Yeah. He said, yeah, it's just a can of soup. It's because it was easy. With no smile on his face. It was like, yeah, I just did it. And he put it out there and just let the world decide whatever they wanted, right? Like the world decided this captures a piece of American culture. This captures American culture, and he's like, or it's just a can of soup. I don't know. But he's like, or you could pay me a bunch of money for it. That's fine.
Right. Right.
And pay me a bunch of money so I can go do my actual weird things in my apartment where the walls are tinfoil. And even his like iconic photos of like Marilyn Monroe, like it's a bunch of hers and they keep degrading.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly the one you're talking about.
And they keep like high quality, and each picture after that keeps degrading. You hear Andy Warhol talk about that, and he made the silk screen of Marilyn Monroe.
Okay.
The more times you use a silk screen, it starts to degrade. You can't just keep using it over and over again and get the same quality. The first one's going to be the best quality, and it's going to start degrading every time you use it.
Okay.
And Andy Warhol's response was, I didn't want to make a new one. I didn't want to make a new silk screen, so I just kept using it. And we see these in series photos of Monroe and Elvis Presley that keep degrading, and like, wow, look at like the natural progression of life and like what art and society does. And he's like, or I just didn't want to make a new one. But at the same time, somebody.
Sorry, that one was just good. That was good.
But at the same time, somebody looks at it and finds something in it.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, it affected their life. It's like, okay. And so I got inspired from Andy Warhol a bit from that, where he was like, take from it what you will. I'm just doing what I like to do. If you happen to connect with it in a way, that's wonderful. I'm not going to tell you what it means. I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong in your interpretation of my art and what I created. Like, no, you got like art is supposed to affect people. It's supposed to move people. And if it well, I'm sorry, I'm getting on all these rabbit trails because now I want to talk about like when you hate something, right? When you really hate something. I think it's because when you really hate it, like when you don't like there's a difference between hate and indifference, right? There's love and hate and indifference. If you don't love something, you're really indifferent to it, meaning you don't care if it's around, you don't care if it exists, you don't think about it. But when you hate something, that's different. That's still affecting you. Just because it's not joyful doesn't mean it's not affecting you on the same level as joy, which to me, that makes me think that piece of art was successful. Inside, your primitive, your primal body, like your primal bones are like, oh, I get it. Why do I want to bop my head to Taylor Swift? You know, and it's like, I don't like Taylor Swift. And you start getting mad about it. Like, I hate Taylor Swift so much. Like, no, you don't. You don't hate Taylor Swift. Normally, you would be indifferent to Taylor Swift because it's not your style of music, which is fine. But the
Right.
reason you hate it is because your body inside is like, it gets it. Like, oh, I
Yes.
get it. But your head
Yeah.
doesn't like the sound of it. And so it's
Right.
conflicting. If you hear music in the same realm as Taylor Swift that doesn't have that same conviction in creating
Hmm.
it,
Yeah.
you become indifferent to it. You just write it off. Whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
don't
Oh
like
yeah. Yeah.
I don't like country music. I don't like pop music. Whatever. And then you hear country music or pop music that makes you mad. It's
Uh-huh.
because you kind of get it.
Yeah. Right.
And
Right.
I
Oh
think
man.
that's with
Yeah.
movies and books and like, yeah. Anyways, I could go off on all these tangents, but
Well, well, and that's fine because what we're looking at here is creativity. Yes, the show's title is Christian Fantasy and Sci-Fi Podcast, but
yeah.
this is also a realm of just simple creativity, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so when we're looking at creativity and we are being judged, we're being
Hmm.
perceived by the world at large. I'm actually reminded, you saying that reminded me of Howard Stern.
Okay.
Because I remembered something he said. How I ended up across this, I don't know.
The internet takes us down some weird holes. You're
It
fine.
does, but he was, somebody was talking to him, producer maybe, about what he was doing wrong and everything, and how he should tame things down. I believe, but the point he made was, okay, so the average listener that likes me is listening how much?
Mhm.
But the average hater is listening to me twice as much.
Mhm.
And so this response
Yeah.
that a person has, it's going to be, it's going to reflect values. It's going to reflect personal
Yeah.
perspectives and this and the like. But the art ended up doing what it does. And
You're
that's starting a conversation
Hmm.
and getting people to respond to it in whatever way they respond.
Yeah.
I'm even reminded I'm even reminded of an old radio show we used to listen to growing up, Adventures in Odyssey,
Hmm.
where Crying Brian Dern, this
Hmm.
radio show host, was very
Right.
questionable and everything, and so he would find ways of being sensational and getting people's opinion or getting people's attention, for that matter.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, the motivation for an artist. Why are you? What are you putting? What are you creating? And why are you putting it out?
Right.
And I would almost ask that same question for you. Why are you creating this, and why are you putting it out there?
Well, that's a good question. Honestly, this interview is coming at a very interesting time in my life because a
Okay.
year and a half ago I had a kid. I got
Uh-huh.
old baby Charlie, right? He's awesome.
Yep.
But and it kind of, it's like, for a lot of people, this, especially so I live in Nashville, Tennessee, where the music industry thrives, and it's not just musicians and artists and writers and stuff. It's like, no, like people, road crews, right? Like stage crews, lighting guys, lighting people, sound people, like they all live here or congregate here.
Right. Sure.
Bus drivers, like
Mhm.
it's a huge industry. And so when COVID hit and took away all live shows, it was a city of depressed people wondering if their career would come back, wondering if I can survive. Like, because like people have to go get a normal job just to be able to pay rent.
Sure.
And like, well, what if I become too dependent on this normal job, all this stuff. But that was a catalyst for a lot of good questions, right? Because for me, it was, I can't do the thing that I thought I was, quote unquote, meant to do.
Right.
So does that mean it's all over?
Mm-hmm.
So like, what's the point of living at that point? And I won't get too grotesque into that train of thought of my mind, but like, but the quick reality of it was like, no, life is worth living.
Yeah.
If I can't, I was like, okay, well, if life is worth living, then maybe you put too much identity into the pursuit of what you create, instead of what I have come to find. It's like the moment is where life happens, right? Like right now, this is life. What we do with our time. I'm living life with you right now. Over the internet. It's miraculous. It's and this is worthwhile. Right. And so it did start that question of, why do I create? Because there is a difference between creating for the sake of creating and creating for the sake of sharing it. And if it does not start from the point of creating for the sake of creating, it's starting from the wrong place. If it does, that's what I think, right? Like if one is not sitting there, I want to write a story about this. If you are not first writing it for yourself,
yes,
then nobody will care about it. Like if you write it for yourself and then you decide, hey, I really have the urge to share this with somebody, or you could write it for yourself and be like, cool, that was fun. I wrote it and I feel so good. You do like in the words of Bo Burnham, if you can live life without an audience, you should do it. Because creation, and creating things in my mind, it is not validated by other people seeing it. The fact that other people see it does not validate. If a tree falls in the woods, does anybody hear it? You're like, of course it makes a sound if no one's there to hear it. Because that's the nature of things. If I created something, is it valid as a creation if someone else doesn't hear it or see it? 100%. And I think it's so easy for society, but especially someone who's in the pursuit of the arts, to like, that's where my money comes from. And so all of a sudden, the pursuit of validation gets muddled in with what I'm creating. Right. And so it's really easy for that locus to change to where like I'm no longer creating something for the sake of creating something. I'm creating something for the sake of what's this going to do on the back end. And if you're going to have a business, if you're going to make money, you do have to think about that stuff. But if you lose balance, it's like there's plenty of things, I have so many creative outlets. I build a lot of things with my hands. I like to do a lot of different types of art, and I don't show it to people because that one's just for me. I don't need you to see it. If you come in my house, you can see it, and I would love to talk to you about it. But so many people, like, I build something and like, oh, you could sell that. Like, I could, but that's not the point of it. That's not why I did it. But then to realize, like, oh, I had lost some of that balance with music. And so the last year and a half has been very uncomfortable because it's one of like, I'm blissful just being with my family and taking care of my kid and taking care of my house. And then questioning was like, wait, why was I doing all of that? because it got muddled, right? It's gotten muddled. And I'm now like, it's been the last few months where I'm starting to have a language. I'm starting to find a language around all of this, and to bring me back into a center. Like, why do I write in the first place? Like, if no one had ever heard Take Time, would it have been worth creating for me? And if the answer is not yes, I don't know that people should do it. That sounds harsh.
If you can't find a new starting point, is what you're saying?
If you can't create just for the sake of creating, like if creating is dependent on other people's approval of it, I think that's an unhealthy origin to create from.
I agree. I completely agree. I
think it was the lead singer of the Velvet Underground, an old punk rock band, that saw an interview with the lead singer who they just stopped. It's been 20 years or however long it's been since they've stopped. I'm not going to know all those numbers, but I saw an interview with the lead singer and like, well, why'd you stop playing? And he's like, well, I wasn't inspired to write anymore. And they're like, well, so what? And he's like, the last thing I wanted to do was become a cover band of myself.
Yeah.
If I didn't have anything to say, the job's over.
Yeah.
And it's time to move on.
Hey, thank you so much for tuning in today. Andrew and I have more of a conversation to come. We're going to make this a two-parter, so stay tuned for next week as we talk more about the magic of creativity. We'll see you then.